Arun, let me quickly jump into this conversation with a question directed at you. Since you helped me draft the speech, I'm going to hold you responsible for this assertion that the state is back, that the state is perhaps no longer allowing communities to operate, the digital communities to operate in the model and in the mode that they did over the last 2 decades. All states, be it the super sovereign states like the EU, or the sovereign states like the US, India, China, Russia, and others, are beginning to want to control. What is driving this tendency of the states wanting to grab control of this medium?
Thanks, Samir, and welcome to everybody from my side as well. So when we were putting this conversation together, as well as the speech that you were talking about, the editor's note, I was trying to decipher where and when can we identify a moment in international politics where you can say the state was truly back. Now, of course, we don't have to go to medieval times. We only need to trace it back to the financial crisis of 2008. And I don't think it's correct to say that the state is back now. The state was back a decade ago. Some states are trying to play catch-up. It was after the financial crisis of 2008 that the United States, for instance, implemented a legislation that required data to be localized. And the idea was that regulators who found that after the collapse of Lehman Brothers, regulators found that they had no access to data records that they needed. And most of this had been stored in servers across Europe. The United States, the most powerful state in the world at that time, tried to regain agency over data that was stored across borders. I think the rest of the world, including India, China, Europe, and all the emerging markets that we talked about today, they're just trying to retain their agency through ways that the United States has taught us. So I don't think it is fair to say, for instance, as the narrative tends to be, that developing countries are trying to impose some sort of alternative model to the liberal capitalist system that has been devised after the Second World War, and so on and so forth. We are only trying to emulate the best, except we are drafting it through better legal instruments and trying to regain agency that perhaps the United States never had over data within its own, held by its companies and held by its institutions.
Let me probe you a little further on that. Transnational corporations and their relationship with the state. I think here we are trying to, when you say the United States, you're actually identifying its entire ecosystem. And do you believe that that remit, the US remit, also extends to the transnational corporations and their behavior and businesses overseas and across shores?
I think transnational corporations, at least some of them, have tried to extend their remit beyond the United States. In fact, I worry that if certain proposals go through, for instance, we are now talking about currencies that are run by platforms. I think we can all accept that currencies were always and should always remain, or perhaps that's my personal view, it should remain the remit of states. Now, if transnational corporations have decided to use their market power that extends or cuts across boundaries, territorial boundaries, to create a barter system of their own, then I think it replaces what is fundamentally the mandate of the state, which is to control currency, for instance. I feel that in the United States case, the extent to which transnational corporations have extended their reach beyond one particular border has gone so far beyond what we would define the conventional relationship between the business and the state that it perhaps may be difficult to put the genie back in the bottle again.
Shweta, let me come to you with a follow-up and taking a leaf out of what Arun has just described for us. And we've had this debate before. Shweta and I have different definitions of what is data. Is it oil? Is it water? Is it currency? Is it God? We've been having this philosophical argument for a while. Let me put it in crude terms. Piketty and others have argued, including many in India, that the level of inequality has never been higher in the last, as it is today. And I think that last peak was probably 30 years ago. I think that's what many people have argued, that this level of inequality was last witnessed a few decades ago. What has happened in the last few decades, coincidentally, is also the rise of these big tech giants from Silicon Valley. It's hard not to see implications, policy implications resulting from this. Why would anyone believe that valuations of Silicon Valley have created value for locality? So when governments try to keep value at home, and of course the policy instrument may be to control the data and data businesses, Why is that it is so surprising and it is so disturbing? Since you have not been able to serve localities and you've only created market valuations, states will have to intervene. And states are not accused of being efficient in their policy making. Let's be very clear. They will come up with bad policies, but that's our fate. Why is it surprising that states want to intervene?
I think it's an interesting question because it is really at the heart of what's happening, Samir, in the digital economy right now. We often say that technology is not good or bad. It's what we do with technology that matters. Similarly, we cannot say big bad tech is all bad because it's what the tech companies are doing with their power or their market valuation or with their products and their services is what matters. And I think that's why it's important that we do not demonize big tech. We do not start having a fierce psychosis around what big tech is going to do to the world. And I think there are some very genuine, understandable concerns. We can also say that not all tech companies have been very responsible actors that have led to this kind of hysteria around what big tech is going to do to us. And that has also made policymakers go into this sudden tizzy of putting in place policies that would somehow control the big bad tech. So I think we need to put into perspective that what we need right now is a more balanced approach. While we understand that it's very, very tough to be a policymaker in today's times, because ultimately you're going to put in place policies that will perhaps determine the fate of countries, companies, citizens for many, many years to come, because this is really a turning point in the history of policymaking, I think, because policymakers around the globe are debating issues that are very, very critical. Privacy, data localization, balkanization. I think these are very critical questions that are in front of us. But I think the only thing I would say is that in this worry and fear that has been created around things that have happened in the last few years, we should not go into an approach where states, policymakers, just out of fear of protecting something, put in place something that would actually harm not just the countries, but because in terms of GDP, in terms of innovation, in terms of economic growth, they're going to actually hurt individuals, citizens. And that's the real danger we are facing today, because we are not seeing sensible, balanced thinking around policy making.
Your particular vantage point, Salesforce, also deals with another key concern that countries seem to be responding to in their policy decisions around creating employment and jobs. And technology has also been squarely accused of destroying jobs. Now, how does a company that is in the business of building jobs, being a tech company, add up? And what is the message you're bringing out, even though Salesforce may be seen as one of those tech companies that has in fact reduced availability of labor, of the labor market, the shrinking of the labor market?
I think, Samir, I don't think we can arrive at that conclusion. It's just too soon to say that any technology or any tech company is taking away jobs, because we're still at that phase where we're seeing what technologies like artificial intelligence, technologies like ML are going to do to the overall digital economy, also in terms of jobs. You specifically mentioned Salesforce, and I'm happy to say that today we believe that the Salesforce economy alone, and when I say the economy, I'm saying these are not direct jobs that a company like Salesforce. So for those who are uninitiated, we're a cloud computing company that pioneered the cloud revolution in '99. Now, as we grew, we also realized that you need more and more people who are trained in Salesforce skills. And we realized that what we're doing is not just creating direct jobs, which is a given, because for a company that's growing at the pace at which we're growing, we're talking about huge growth in the jobs. But what we're also doing is we're creating an ecosystem and an economy around us, which is your administrators, your developers, your business analysts. And data shows that in India alone, we're looking at this ecosystem of 1.1 million jobs in the next 2 years. So what companies are doing, I think, again, just like I said, there is some sort of fear psychosis around what tech companies will do with our data, with privacy. There is also a misperception around the whole jobs debate. I think the whole future of skills, what we need to talk about is skilling. What we need to talk about is skills needed in the fourth industrial revolution. How are we gearing our workforce to be skilled enough to take on the jobs that will be the jobs of the future? I think those are more pertinent questions rather than worrying ourselves sick over the fact that technology is going to take away jobs.
Sean, and before I come to Sean, let me make a pitch for all of you to pick up the copy of the digital debates that's placed outside. I think it's the best edition produced till now simply because Arun joined me as an editor. It is an extremely good journal we produced this year. One of the papers has been written by Sean. Sean, I want to, and you've in a sense described the state of the tech conversations today or the tech reality today. I want you to dwell on that briefly, how you see our interactions with technology today. And then I want you to also pause and ponder over emerging technology and the emerging divides. Is there a correlationship there?
All right, well, thank you. And of course, thank you to all of you and welcome for joining us for this next iteration of Sci-Fi. I always greatly enjoy being on this initial provocative discussion and then hearing how you take these ideas forward in the next couple days and learning from you all. Samir, to your question of the emerging tech and where is it, I totally agree with your forward and the discussions here that you're seeing more sovereign imposition of will, you're seeing more tension points. And as a strategist and a strategic analyst, one of my great concerns is that these issues of technology and AI in particular are being adopted by countries in a competitive and in a very security-related way. Certainly it's fueling the economies, but if you look at the national AI strategies for most countries, to which I'll note India's is decidedly different in its writing, some of the work here being done at the national strategy level. But if you look at the US or the Chinese or the Russian comments, for example, they are very competitive, almost suggesting a competitive zero-sum arms race in this area. And that's very concerning because you're not going to see the level of collaborative innovation you may have seen in other areas or we may have hoped for up until now. Let me give you one very poignant example of an emerging tech issue that I think will become a strategic counterpoint. In today's world, the largest cloud service providers are largely of North American origin. The best proofs and implementations so far of 5G transport technologies are European and Asian. If data is actually this new most valuable commodity, what do you do in a geopolitical and geostrategic environment where one continent or certain leading powers are behind the value proposition of processing and manipulating it, yet in order to get that value to the location where it can be used, you're reliant on some of their greatest competitors and or adversaries. That, to me, will be a very interesting strategic dynamic in the future. So, unfortunately, I see these new tech developments largely being done unilaterally in order to gain economic and national security advantage. Hopefully we'll find ways for better synergy and mutual growth. But when I read the strategies and I look at some of the policies, whether data localization or other things that are getting put in place, they are very competitive in nature. And I think it's because many of the nations view this as the source of their future economic power and their ability to project geopolitical power in the future as well.
Can you also specifically for our community here share your thoughts on this decoupling that seems to be underway?
Yeah, where we have less cooperation and mutual interest, I do feel we're going to see more conflict and tension in the future, and this is what my piece in Digital Debates speaks to. The title we have is Future Conflict, the Nays Have It. The piece is about 4 negative macro trends and the negative and mutually reinforcing nature among them. Insecurity, when you talk about loss of labor or trade wars, you have insecurity at the national but also at the personal level. That is partially fueled and furthered by disinformation. That's the second of the negative traits. Those together fuel an anti-globalist position. And when we talk about the decoupling, certainly you see nations or regions who do not view their fate in a global cooperation, but in a competitive regionalist or nationalist perspective. And whether you look at the current politics in the United States or Brexit or other things happening, you're seeing a populist nationalist resurgence in this tension. Now, unfortunately, that anti-globalization and that insecurity further fuel not only a desire to perpetuate disinformation, but also a heightened susceptibility to it. Consider something like Russia's interest in defending its information space at the same time that they are promulgating competing scenarios of world events. They are very concerned about foreign information entering their information space, and they are willfully engaging to manipulate foreign information spaces. So there's a recursive factor to this, and unfortunately, I think those three factors in their synergy all result in the fourth factor of unenlightenment. For roughly 300 years, we've been talking about scientific method, objective truth, shared rationality. And what we're seeing today is it's very difficult to have a shared situational awareness. It's very difficult to prove to a competitor or a naysayer what constitutes valid evidence, what constitutes objective proof of an actual reality. So I invite you to read not only my piece, but all the other works in this very interesting issue of digital debates, but that's pretty much what I was getting at. 4 negative macro trends that synergistically are leading us to this tense future conflict. Maybe not necessarily warfare, but a constant tension of jockeying for position and power.
And being the digital philosopher, you have coined a term to capture this.
Maybe I'll turn to you for the pronunciation of it, because it hasn't been said yet. But in the piece, I conjoin the in from security, the dis from information, the anti from globalization, and the un from unenlightenment. I guess you'd probably pronounce it Indisantian or something like that, but I think it's a Samir. He can phrase it.
Indisantium, yeah, that's my Indian accent, but yeah, it sounds good. Sounds serious. And since you mentioned disinformation, I have to come to my colleague from Twitter. So, Mahima, he mentioned disinformation. On a more serious note, I think information control was also something that the states have always engaged in. Like he mentioned, he described the Russian tendency, but that's also the US tendency. It was always, you had information operations America conducted over shores. They used their, the might of their institutions to change mindsets. It's not something that the Russians do. The Russians probably now use the digital medium better than most. But it's certainly been a zero-sum race for information control since time immemorial. Twitter is the new playing ground for all these tendencies. And I think the two questions I want to pose to you. The first, because of this tendency for using these platforms to do everything that Sean described, are you beginning to see boundaries being erected on this medium? So is information now flowing in certain circles? And the whole idea of fluidity of information, is that born? That's the first question. And the second question, Twitter may call itself a global platform, but when we see certain news agencies' handles being stopped because there is a certain tension mounting up, or you see certain kind of information blocked, people, maybe they exaggerate certain developments, but you are also seeing people question the international element or descriptor to platforms which are largely seen as US platforms. Now, how do you respond to these two challenges?
Thank you for this.
That's the easy one.
That's the easy one. No, I think, I was looking at the headlines when we were doing sci-fi last year when we had this panel, and I was just going back in time to see the work done really about disinformation and using our platform, but of course many other platforms, and what has been the story in the last year. And it's interesting because around October last year was when Twitter released the first data set on Russian interference in the US elections. And if you've been paying attention, any of you are academics or researchers, you'll see that subsequent data sets have been released to show state-sponsored activity on the platform, which is a vast number of countries, including the UAE, including Egypt, including Saudi Arabia, including China. So there has been a lot of work done to understand how the platform is being manipulated and to get better at stopping that manipulation. So I think there will always be, as you mentioned, states will always try and control the pipes and the message, but it's up to the platform to also understand how best to evolve in order to meet these challenges. So I think Twitter, in particular, has been the most open of all the platforms in terms of the regular data sets that we've been giving out so that people can look for themselves and understand better actually what's happening, because it's easy to say it's happening, it's more difficult to actually examine how the platforms have been used and how to actually tackle this. So that's one part of it. I think the second question that you asked, and if I missed anything, just
The second question is actually the one I asked Arun.
Yeah.
That how easy is it for Twitter to work in India today?
Yeah. So I think we have always respected the jurisdictions in which the company has been there. But the idea is that Twitter is a global service, right? And we have like Twitter rules that span the global.
And are they the same everywhere?
Yeah, the essential, like the Twitter rules are obviously global in nature, and we try and action against those rules. But as you know yourself, and as we have developed in the years, you do respond to local laws and you do respond to local, cultural context. So I'll give you like a practical example. We have something called the Trust and Safety Council, right? And it's like this global council that meets, NGOs from across the world, and they advise us on what our policy should be. They let us know that, hey, listen, I think you need to look into this area because you need a policy against which you can action. And over time, we realized that as much as the global meet makes sense, regional meets actually make more sense because there's a lot of regional and specific in-country sensitivities that we need to understand and respond to. So there is a realization, of course. And then the second part of your question is that there is, countries are going to exercise their jurisdictions, and so legal channels exist, as they do in India, where the government does get in touch with us to ask for, valid legal request information, and there is a mechanism by which they can block content within the jurisdiction of their country. I think it becomes problematic if they want, not the Indian government, but other governments would want content blocked in another jurisdiction, because no country would take that. It puts us in an odd position, so we will only do what is
So
legally
do you have certain content which is visible only in certain jurisdictions?
which is visible. No, we have content which is not visible.
In certain jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So there is a certain part of Twitter which is dark for certain jurisdictions.
Yeah, so if a country has legally asked us to block certain content in a jurisdiction, you can very clearly see it on Twitter saying that this content has been withheld in response to a legal order. So it's very clear. We upload these orders to a portal called Lumen, which is actually hosted by Harvard, and people can actually see for themselves. And then the whole the information is then also reported to people in our transparency reports, which all companies have. Twitter was in the forefront of publishing the transparency report. So as a user, because ultimately it is also about the end user, you can completely understand, what your country is doing and what the legal requests are, and depending on where you're placed, you're happy about it or you're unhappy about it. But the information is there to be seen.
So as we approach the last 10 minutes of this opening conversation, I want all of you to think about two questions that I'm putting out there. The first, what are the few things that you believe will be central to the next year in terms of tech policy, technology and community, technology and economy? What are the 2-3 things that you think should be most importantly followed, observed, studied and responded to? And second, and I think for me, because I rate this as my single biggest worry, having just finished a 3-year term at the Global Commission, and having spoken to people who know a lot, my worry is that do you think the tech space is diverse enough? Do we have enough diversity in how technology is developing? And I'm talking about patriarchy, I'm talking about also exclusion of certain communities. Do you think we have done enough to bring gender and cultural and social diversity into the architecture and frameworks that are being shaped today to develop the tech space? Let me start with Sean and then just mix it up after that. I'll just, based on the look on your face, I know whether you're ready or not.
You've got my wheels turning. We didn't discuss this one in advance.
I know, there's a curveball, yeah?
I do have a couple of responses. On the policy side, I think the most important thing to watch in the next year is how the two parallel processes at the United Nations proceed. The group of governmental experts and the open-ended working group. So there are two new processes being launched. They are communicating with one another, but I think as far as global governance on some of these issues, that will be some of the most interesting developments to follow.
But what happened to multi-stakeholderism? Both these processes are multilateral by definition.
Right, well, the GGE is closed to purely multilateral, and the open-ended working group is having advisors and observers there as well. So they're slightly different, but largely it's under the UN.
And what about the idea of an expanded IGF with more teeth?
I'm sorry?
The idea that the IGF plus format could emerge? The IGF could be given the Internet Governance Forum, which is multi-stakeholder?
Theoretically, but I will offer that's not an area that I'm personally expertise on, so I would defer to others on the IGF. Technologically speaking, I think the greatest changes are going to come in the synergies of the technologies that we're talking about. So a lot of the past decade of my career was on cybersecurity. I personally believe the entire cyber discussion is being revolutionized with AI and distributed ledger technology. So rather than looking at specific technologies and their implications, I would be looking at the synergies and combinations of them for where really new, exciting innovation and future challenges are going to be coming. In particular, as we go maybe even a little beyond just the next 12 months, I think it's going to be the nexus between information technology and biotechnology that's going to be massively changing things. Lastly, on the diversity side, as we've always said at Sci-Fi, we're very interested in new voices and their inputs, and I think that's going to be central. And why do I say that? I'm concerned that both the macro trends we see in policy, as well as where we see technology going, it's actually constraining human opportunity or freedom in certain ways, rather than necessarily building it. What do I mean by that? Let's take a look at one simple concrete example very quickly. Think about autonomous vehicles or driverless cars. You are soon going to have thoroughfares of driverless vehicles who operate in a systemic way, speaking to the smart roads in the smart city. The car will not be allowed to speed. It will not be allowed to go off the road. And that's a good thing. But now think if, as code is law, if your entire world and your entire city become digitized and automated and made much more efficient for public safety and collective interest, your ability to have promulgate freedom of thought or certain elements of artistry may not be possible. I welcome my private sector.
Like create a traffic jam because you want to.
Well, the example I've given before is getting your pregnant wife to the hospital in time. As you know, we just had a child. We got a speeding ticket on Angela's way to the hospital. I'm happy about that ability.
Okay. Because you have the right to do that.
Because I had the technical capability to do it, even though it may not have been right.
Okay. Shweta, you want to come in?
I could go next. So I think if we talk about trends that will shape the digital economy, I would say it's trust, trust, and trust. And the reason I say that is because the trends that shaped our conversations in the last 1 or 2 years have actually been the trust deficit that we've seen between companies and individuals, between governments and companies, and between governments and individuals. So I think trust will be the centerpiece of our conversation. It will be the centerpiece of the legislations that we're going to put in place. And if we were to go into more specifics, I think it is a lot to do around the data privacy legislations that we would see around the globe. We know that we've seen some progress already over there. We know there's a GDPR in place. We know that there are different states in the United States that are coming up with their own legislations. And then there are countries like India that are still contemplating and still trying to balance different objectives of law enforcement that we see policymakers grappling with right now, and those are genuine concerns. You know, we have Lieutenant General Pant sitting right here, and we've had these questions discussed multiple times about just the pain that policymakers face when dealing with real law enforcement issues, getting data from different countries. Those are hard questions, and those are questions that we as corporates have to help policymakers address. But at the same time, are we going to ensure that the regulations are light touch and progressive enough that we do not stifle innovation, that we do not take away the benefits of globalization that we've seen, or take away from the basic inherent nature of the internet, which is to be global, and don't create these artificial boundaries that will actually hurt more than help.
And diversity?
Diversity is an interesting one, and I think, Samir, we're way off from where we should be. I think we have to move away from just calling it diversity to calling it equality. And I think that will be the key differentiator. It will be your competitive advantage if you get it right. Because I think if you look at what has happened, whether it's on Wall Street or it's in Silicon Valley, we know that companies have been punished when they have not taken the equality piece seriously. We know that today we live in a world where employees are empowered to ask those questions, and where companies that are seen to be doing the right thing on equality are the companies that have the right culture now succeeding. Because now what you create is again, an ecosystem. It's no longer just about your culture as a company. It's about your customers asking you to do the right thing. It's about your employees asking you to do the right thing. So if you're not doing the right thing, you will be punished.
Arun?
So let me stand on the shoulders of Sean and Shweta and sort of elevate this and say that the biggest problem facing us within the governance of tech spaces is the absence of conflict. The context of our discussions today, whether it has to do with the economy, national security, access, even questions of diversity, they all happen in the absence of conflict. And every major configuration that currently exists in the world today is in some way the product of war. Whether it's the Peace of Westphalia that was forged in the aftermath of war, whether it was the liberal international order that we see today, which was again forged in the aftermath of a cataclysmic war. There is something about conflict that puts humans together in a room and forge relationships that go well beyond the management of conflict. The Second World War was, of course, we all know how it ended, but the international regimes that came to manage the world after the Second World War had very little to do with conflict. They had to do with the management of economic resources. They had to do with the right of self-determination, which in turn answers your questions about diversity. This is when we saw the first wave of countries offering rights to women and marginalized communities across the world. There's something about conflict, and I fear the absence of war is making us complacent and not giving enough thought. Although I don't want to be a warmonger, I'm just saying that the absence of conflict
sounded like one.
is not giving us enough to think about regarding the re-management or the reorientation of the way we govern technology.
So let me, since you're the one who's actually put this together, Arun, which are the 3 or 4 panels that you're really looking forward to over the next 2 days?
I'm the one, I should say, the one that I'm looking forward to.
And not the ones that you are sitting on. So
Which, of course, you should all attend. But the one that I'm looking forward to most, because it addresses the issue of our time, is the one on accountable boardrooms and accountable technology. I think we've got an excellent set of folks from including our partners who have generously lent our support, and we have put them in tough panels. But props to them for attending to a question that we really need to address, whether boardrooms are accountable enough to the public that they serve. That's one panel that I'm very interested to attend. The other one that we crafted together is the one on the cloud state, and the question about whether the state's influence today extends much beyond the boundaries that it is geographically confined to, and whether the communities within those states in turn have been able to punch above their weight thanks to the influence of digital networks. And of course, I'm looking forward to the panel on the commission, the Global Commission on Cyber Stability, because I'm not too convinced that you guys did a good job, so I intend to question a lot of you.
Sean, panel you want to pick out?
Not to be parochial, but I'll be moderating one on AI-related issues, and I'm deeply interested in that and to learn from the panelists. I think we've got a great lineup there. And again, one of my favorite aspects of coming to sci-fi are the panels that address women and diversity. So I always look forward to learning from those.
Shweta.
Same, I think the diversity one, because that's clearly one panel that I think it's important that in conferences like these, we put these issues top of center, because if we do not, then we're missing out on our responsibility and being accountable. So definitely the one on diversity.
So 8 years ago, there was someone who was lost and didn't know what to do, met me for a cup of coffee and said, what should I do? I said, let's start sci-fi. Her name was Mahima Kaul. So we started this together in 2013. Mahima, is the program, does it hold up to the standard you said?
No, I think it's fantastic when you have 25 different conversations going on. But I'll sort of go back to the original question that you asked and then come back to chit-chatting on sci-fi. A little bit in your question, it's almost like you predetermined the answer that I think global is over and we're in the Splinternet, and I hope that that's not really the case.
I'm hoping people will challenge that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of us over here are beneficiaries of, global free flow of exchanges with global systems and the globalized world. And so we know what the upside can be, and I think the whole effort being made over here is that we recognize the real politics of it all, but how can you actually maintain that global conversation, because that global conversation has resulted in some fantastic achievements, right? So I don't think that story is done as yet, because we do obviously as a global company, but everybody in this room has experience of this, that there are like competing questions and sort of regulations and laws coming in from different jurisdictions. Our team, and I'm sure Facebook and other companies can attest to the fact, have been attending and speaking at hearings all over the world, trying to explain what is social media, what are the products, and trying to respond to the curiosity and the questions that involve.
Facebook is able to create hearings. so they're at another level, right? But we come to that. We'll come to that at a
But at
different
the
time.
same time, if you look at like different forums, like for example OECD right now in taxation, they're also sort of, they're looking at can there be any collaboration in terms of what they're doing with digital taxation rather than unilateral action. So you have to look at like different people who are trying to understand, do we not damage the global economy while taking these kind of unilateral actions to to look at our own jurisdictions. And what Arun said about conflict, it just made me think that, well, there may not be, a juicy war going on that we can really point to right now, but if you look at conflict, in the sense, if you look at what's happening with counterterrorism, out of conflict and repeated conflict, there has been this industry association which has been formed, which has evolved greatly, and you're sharing data in real time, and there's actually a way to work in real time with law enforcement should there be a very big incident that needs to be taken care of immediately, content taken down. So there are responses actually that are being developed as the problems, and I think we need to look at both of them, because if we always raise the problems without really addressing the fact that work has been done in the last year, and we're at a different place right now, then we'll just end up asking the same questions again. And so I hope that's discussed in the next 2 days as well.
Excellent. So this is not a panel where we bring you in, but all others are after the next one. After the ministerial panel, we will have conversations with all of you on the issues that we discussed. There are mics on the aisle, so if someone has to ask a question, you have to walk to one of the mics and pose the question. The chair will notice you and bring you in. But please join me in applauding the co-chairs for setting the stage and for sharing their thoughts on what promises to be a great conference. We are going to have a long session for you from 7 to 8:45. So those of you who want to use this as a pit stop, we are going to give you 10 minutes. At 6:55, I want you all back in the room. We are going to close the door and the minister will join us by 7. So you have 10 minutes to stretch your legs and come back, and we will see you again at 7 for the ministerial address and for the opening panel, which will discuss one of the most important issues, which is around combating online security threats and how communities, countries and corporations are working together to put forward a new arrangement. So thank you very much. 10 minutes and we'll see you at 7.